Hey class, it's Miss Jump again, and today we're actually going to get into the official start of World War II. And as a really quick review, I want to look at these two men, and these are both prime ministers of European countries. Over here is Winston Churchill, and he's the Prime Minister of England. And over here is Michel de Moix. I think is how you pronounce his name. I am not very good at French. I'm not even good in English, so. But these two people are really worried about what's happening right now in Europe. And they sign a pact called the Munich Pact with Germany. They chose to avoid a war with Germany by allowing Germany, or Hitler, to behave as he pleased. But Hitler, he had no intentions of avoiding war and grew bolder with every aggressive step he took. And in March of 1939, he broke the Munich Pact by invading Czechoslovakia and seizing control of Prague, which is the capital of Czech. And as Churchill suspected early on, appeasement, or the act of appeasement, that was the practice that was happening with with France and England, of allowing Germany to do as he pleased, or negotiating with Germany, was just causing Germany to increase their want or their drive to imperialize. So they told Germany that, hey, you can invade Czechoslovakia and you can have Austria, but if you invade any further, we will, between France and I, and I'm speaking as Mr. Churchill himself, we will invade, or we will declare war on Germany. So knowing that this was happening, and knowing that war was inevitable, according to Hitler, he looked for assistance. And part of Hitler's plans for war involved Stalin. And we haven't talked about Stalin just a whole lot yet, but Stalin is the leader, if you can remember, of the Soviet Union. And he's a communist. Communists and Nazis hated each other, despised each other. In fact, if you were in Soviet Russia and you were a Nazi, you were thrown in the Gulag, which was their version of concentration camps. And if you were in Nazi Germany and you were a communist, you were thrown in the concentration camps as well. So they hated each other. At first, you think that they had very little reason to actually cooperate with this. Yet, Hitler sought an agreement with Stalin to keep the Soviet Union neutral in the coming war. And Hitler offered Stalin a non-aggression treaty, and Stalin had accepted it. And the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Act was signed in August of 1931. So German-Soviet. German-Soviet. (1939). And I'm going to put August because a lot starts to happen in August, or in 1939. So Hitler goes to Stalin. He says, look, I was told that I'm not supposed to attack Poland, but I'm going to. I'm going to attack Poland. And I know that the moment I attack Poland, that this was going to likely start a war throughout Europe. And the geography of that war really concerned Hitler. So the Soviet Union over here lay to the east, and we've talked about this two-front war when we discussed World War I. And Britain and France lay over here to the west. And Hitler could not afford to fight a war on two fronts, east and west, at the same time. For that reason, the Soviet neutrality was vital, and the pact helped Stalin too. The Soviet dictator wanted more power and secure borders, and as a part of the pact, Hitler secretly promised to give Stalin a part of Poland and grant him a sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. So give him some land and some resources that he needs to grow his empire. And if you watch my video that I have over Stalin, you know that he is wanting to do two things in the Soviet Union. He wants to increase agriculture, and he wants to modernize industry. And getting more land, getting more resources can do a lot for that. But Hitler, he knew that this was going to be short-lived. he had plans to attack the Soviet Union, which was vast and had fertile farmlands that were key to fulfilling his quest for Lebensraum, or a living space for the Aryans. And Hitler also understood that Nazi Germany could not coexist for long with communist USSR on the east. At the moment, with the Soviet Union neutralized, Hitler sprang into action. And on September 1st, 1941, Germany's army marched into Poland. And 2 days later, France and Britain, the Allied powers, declared war on Germany, and World War II had begun. So, Germany invades Poland. And I always joke around about how I don't care about dates. I don't think dates are very special, but this is one of those dates that you do need to remember, because it ignites the entire war. So in Poland, the German forces relied on a strategy of blitzkrieg, or lightning war. If you translate blitzkrieg from German to English, it is lightning war. Now, the first thing that I want to do real fast, and I'm hoping that this would help you. If this does not and you're still confused, I encourage you to let me know, and I can give you some resources that will better understand, or maybe put it into a better perspective. There are some good videos online, but they're kind of long in length, and I don't feel like if you can grasp the concept with this, then I don't see that it's necessary for you to watch it. But if you're still confused, I could share those videos with you. So I'm going to draw, two sides. So you have, let's do cyan. And I know this is not very pretty, but we're going to say this is Poland, sorry. And we're going to have magenta. All right. And this is Germany. They're gearing up to war. In Poland, they have all of their military kind of all ready, right? Like they have their back here, they have their communication lines, and this is supposed to be like, phone lines or whatever. And over here, they have a selection of their planes, which, gosh, I can't draw, guys. You should know this, but you have their plane collection. Their air force is waiting here in case a war breaks out. And then, of course, you have your army waiting along the line of where they're expecting the attack to occur. Now, the Blitzkrieg starts off with using the German Air Force. And the first things that the Germans do is they fly on top of everything, and they destroy the communication lines that they have, and destroy as many integral areas that the Polish army has in their arsenal. So anything that they can go back to return and get more stuff, or to communicate with one another, is destroyed with airstrikes. This is using planes and bombs. Destroy that area. And so the only thing they have left now, and at that point, the German army looks for weak spots in the Polish army, in the defensive line right here. And the infantry troops line up like you would in a traditional war to create a smoke screen. And they line up so that those in the Polish side of the army cannot see this gathering of tanks, of resources, of more planes that are happening. And I know this isn't looking like planes, but these are supposed to be planes. I'll try to... I'm making it worse. But those are supposed to be planes. Now, then, once this happens, once they line up to hide the fact of what they're doing, planes bomb military and civilian targets even more than they already did. destroying communication lines even further, disrupting any sort of movement that the enemy has. Finally, once this is complete, once they feel that this is necessarily taken care of, or this area is taken care of, the tanks break through the line and they go into the army of the Polish army. And they break through weak spots that they have found. And they usually have like 2 or 3 lines. For this example, I'm going to do 3 lines. And the 3 lines here are going to be areas that they literally break a line. So you would further disrupt any kind of communication that can happen. So now you have 4 groups of the Polish military all being separated. There's no way for them to communicate with one another. And to make it worse, is this makes it so that the German army that's located right here can go and follow the tanks through this breakage. And now they are behind the enemy, and they have the opportunity to fight from behind and have more of the army come and meet the rest there. And by this point, by the time the infantry come up to invade Poland to help out after the tanks arrive, most of the people there are already gone. They're dead. And this practice, this blitzkrieg, is incredibly successful. So this method can be summarized by outflank, surround, and destroy. Ill-equipped and overwhelmed, the Polish military quickly collapsed. And on September 17th, the Soviet army invaded Poland from the east. And by the 1st of October, Germany and Hitler now switched his focus to the west. And just to review real fast, you have the German Reich being taken over right here. You have them taking over Poland now. You have them taking over Czechoslovakia, Austria. So you see this German empire growing and growing every single day. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through some of the actions that occurred. However, it's a lot. And I just want you to pay attention to the growth of the map as I am talking. So he focuses attention to the west, and he moved soldiers to Germany's border with France and the Low Countries. So he decides he's going to meet France here with the border, the Low Countries, which are Netherlands and Belgium. And France and England at this point is already expecting them to come and charge France through this border here. So they already have their lines set up. And so they're relying for their main defense against Germany at the Maginot Line. And it's a string of heavily armed forces along the German border. Most French troops were actually located here, and while others kind of gathered along with the border of Belgium and Netherlands. British forces crossed the English Channel. So I'm going to actually change the color so I don't get confused and you don't get confused. So they cross the English Channel. So they drop off troops to help with this defense. For the next few months, not much really happened. Everyone's kind of preparing for this war. You know, they're all standing up and they're waiting for something to happen, but no one has actually attacked, or there isn't a lot of damage being done yet. And so in America, when we get news about this, we kind of nickname this the phony war. And we're not seeing a lot of action. It's right now just all talk once again. But suddenly, a series of lightning actions. The Germans struck, and in April of 1940, they launched a surprise attack on Denmark and Norway. So Hitler is super smart about this, right? He is seeing that everyone is lining up against the Maginot Line. And he knows that it would be a dumb decision to try to attack them through this line because they have all of the military forces along these borders here. So instead of going in and taking France, he decides he's going to take over Denmark. which is not something that neither the neither the English or the French actually understand or see it coming. And he takes over Norway. So now you have pink, let me add some more pink, Germans taking over Denmark and Germans taking over Norway. And this all happens within a few weeks. And he conquered 2 of these Scandinavian countries. And on May 10th, Germans invaded the Low Countries. After getting all of this countries here, all of the Scandinavian countries here, they decide that they're going to invade the Low Countries, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. So, to just kind of finish this off here, you have 1940 German offensive. And Europe begins. So using blitzkrieg tactics, which we just explained a few minutes ago, the main German force bust through Luxembourg and southern Belgium into France. So they go through here, they take over all of these countries here, and they are finally entering the country of France. Then it began a dramatic drive toward the French coast. And skirting the Maginot Line, which is still here, the French forces are still waiting along this border here. They are actually deciding to go around the border of France instead. Hundreds and thousands of British troops and French troops found themselves trapped in a sinking pocket of French countryside, and they retreated toward the port of Dunkirk. So they started to kind of go around. They're going along the border. They're all splitting up, and there is a port right here called Dunkirk. And that might seem familiar to you. A couple of years ago, there was a movie that was made about this specific event. And I actually haven't been able to watch it yet, but it is supposed to be one of the best movies of the year, so we'll see. So that happens in the northwest coast of France. Dunkirk is on the northwest coast of France. And Britain, over here, sends every boat they could across the border to the English Channel to evacuate the soldiers that are there, the French soldiers that have been helping out over here in the Low Countries and helping the French out. They try to evacuate as many of them as they possibly can, and they actually evacuate some 330,000 men. So Dunkirk happens on the same year that the offensive begins. Meanwhile, Paris is falling. Paris is falling to the Germans. And Mussolini, at this time, sees what's going on, sees how England is freaking out. France is about to fall. Germany is being quite successful with campaigning and taking over where he wants to go. That it's at this point that Italy decides that, hey, they're going to join the fight. And immediately, they join the war and declare war on England and France. And this is where you see the creation of the Axis powers. Now, Italy is involved with the same war that Germany is, and now they're working together. So at this moment, this is where Italy and Germany are one. They are working together as Axis powers. And on June 22nd, so this first happens in April, and on June 22nd, so March, April, May, June, 2 months after they begin their first invasion around Europe, France falls. Well, really what happens is Germany was able to take control of France, and then France they surrendered on June 22nd. And under the terms of the armistice, Germany would occupy 3/5 of the country, and the southwest or the southeast would become a puppet government known as Vichy France. So I'm going to actually erase all of this real fast so I can update the map. So once again, you have Germany here, the German Reich taking over. You have Poland, you have Czechoslovakia, you have Austria, and now you have France. Well, 3/5 of France. So at this point, you have the Allied powers, which are England, France, and America, really. Now, France is gone. France is taken over by the Allied powers, or the Axis powers. And now, England has to fight this war against Germany on their own. So England is now, at this point, run by a guy named Winston Churchill. And this is him right here. He is the Prime Minister of England. And he is actually the guy that I mentioned in the last video that was there during the signing of the Munich Agreement and said that we will see whether or not this works. And he's realized that the Munich Agreement failed completely. So after the evacuation of Dunkirk, Churchill had vowed to fight Germany and to defend Britain with every resource at his disposal. And there's a quote here that I want to read, and it's from a speech before the House of Commons, which is the British version of the House of Representatives, in June 4th of 1940. "We shall not flag, tire, nor fail. We shall go on the end. We shall fight on the seas of the oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. And we shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. And we shall fight with the beaches, landing grounds, and fields, and streets on the hills. And we shall never surrender." So I want to talk about real fast of English geography. Now this right here is a picture of England. And this is a border of England, really the eastern border, and it's called the Salt Hills. Now the Salt Hills, as you can see, is large. It would be very, very difficult to get a boat to invade England. And that is part of the reason why you see the British Navy becoming such a powerhouse throughout history. They rely on the fact that this country is a difficult country to invade. And because they're an island, they have to have a sphere of influence with the water around them and to prevent people from attacking their trade route. So Hitler wanted to conquer Britain, but he knew that the large and powerful British Navy could keep his army from crossing the English Channel. And to defeat that navy, he needed to establish dominance in the air. And he set up air bases and conquered lands from France to Norway and moved some 2,800 bombers and fighter planes to those areas. And here's an example of a fighter plane that is used in Germany in 1940. So beginning in the summer of 1940 and into the fall, the Germans began attacking British ships, ports, airfields, radar stations, and industrial centers. And to conquer this onslaught, the British set up a fighter pilot of the Royal Air Force, or the RAF, in an engagement known as the Battle of Britain. And the RAF pilots flying their Spitfires and Hurricanes proved effective against the German air campaign. And by late August, they had downed more than 600 German aircraft at a cost of 260 German pilots. So a war literally begins in the air. Since the Germans know that they cannot control or take over England by land, they have the entire war, at least at this point in 1940, in the air. And it's called the Battle of Britain. Now, in September of that year, Britain launched its first bombing raid in Berlin. And Germany shifted its targets to British cities. So once Britain decided to start attacking German cities with air raids, the Germans decided to do the same to the English cities. And for several months, bombing attacks devastated sections of London and other large cities in England. Londoners called this campaign the Blitz, a shortening for the word Blitzkrieg. And by the spring of 1941, the number of raids had dwindled. So 1940, the Battle of Britain, and then the start of the London Blitz. And I'm going to end this video lesson with a clip from the movie Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The very start of the movie, you see an attack happen in England. And it starts with air pilots, and the whole part of this movie, or this whole section of the movie, is about getting the kids into safety. And eventually they get sent to live with their aunts or something. But I wanted to show this scene, not only because it's a little bit easier to understand what I'm talking about, but also it is Narnia, and everyone loves Narnia. So I will be quiet while this is going on, and if I see anything that I want to talk about, I'll do it after the video. But this is pretty much what I'm going to end this video lesson with. But what you are going to be doing today for the assignment is analyzing the Munich Agreement, understanding kind of what was the agreement and why appeasement existed. Why did they choose to allow Hitler to expand as much as they did before getting involved? And then tomorrow, we're going to try to do something a little bit different. I haven't completely decided on what I'm going to do yet, but whatever I figure out, I will let you know. And again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to message me, get to know me. I have been quite lazy, and I have been replying to some emails, but I'm a little bit behind. So please push with me here together, and I hope that the quarantine has been treating you well. Oh, before I actually start this, I do want to warn you, it does get a little loud. So if you're listening in headphones and you're spooked with like sudden noises, this might be the time to turn your volume down slightly. What do you think you're doing? Disinfecting the shelter! Now! Come on, David! Lucy, come on! Come on, quickly, run! Run! Oh, come on! Dad! Ed! Get back here! I'll get him! Get him back there! Ed! Come here! Edward! Get down! Come on, you idiot! Come on! Get out! Come on! Hurry! Why can't you let anyone but yourself? You're so selfish. You could have got us killed. Stop it! Why can't you just do as you're told?